So, in the year 2013, the National Geographic began an amazing digital storytelling event called Out of Eden, which would be reported or told by Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Paul Salopek, who over the course of 12 years in 4 continents would use history, genetics, and archaeology as his guides as he retraced humankind's 21,000-mile migration from the Great Rift Valley of Ethiopia, our evolutionary Eden, to Tierra del Fuego in Chile, the very tip of South America where our forebears eventually migrated. So why do I care about this guy and his journey? When I saw the beginning article about a man who was going to walk 21,000 miles across the world, I was immediately interested. But it was his opening words about the journey that instilled in me a different way, perhaps, in how to approach the concept of Advent, of being alert and paying attention to what signs of Christ might be coming into our lives, and how we might be signs of Christ to others. So Salopek, and you can look him up on National Geographic. I don't know if he's still doing this. He used to put out a video almost every week classrooms could watch, because basically he is walking. There's always a guide, a translator with him. And one of the things that he continually said was whatever small village he came to, the people out of curiosity would immediately come out, invite him into their homes, serve them meals. He said one time the hospitality was so much he had to find a hotel where he could stay. And he said, why is it that people left Louisiana to begin with? What started that? He said, because of our human curiosity. What is over that hill? What is over that hill? We should never lose that type of curiosity. Anyway, he began this by saying, walking is falling forward. Each step we take is an arrested plunge, a collapse averted, disaster braked. And this way to walk becomes an act of faith. We perform it daily. The 2-beat miracle, the iambic teetering, the holding on and letting go. I am on a journey. I am in pursuit of an idea, a story. If you ask, I will tell you that I have embarked on this project for many reasons. To relearn the contours of our planet at the human pace of 3 miles an hour. To slow down. Slow down. And think. To write. To render current events as a form of pilgrimage. He went on to say, I hope to repair certain important connections burned through by artificial speed, by inattentiveness. I walk as everyone does to see what lies ahead. I walk to remember. So Advent is that time in the church year where we remember the story of how Jesus came among us. When we ourselves are on a pilgrimage of sorts, as we relearn the contours of our faith, and perhaps seek to repair connections we've rushed through or to which we have been inattentive. We reflect upon the coming of Christ who entered the world in order to bring about a transformation, a change in the way that people live. So Advent is much like that out of Eden journey because it calls for us to slow down, to remember the story, to think, to imagine, to write, to be engaged in life, to see the needs of others, and to walk one step at a time into whatever lies ahead. Which sounds wonderful and peaceful. But there is another side to Advent, that expectation time which through contradiction and stress, through the way the secular world has taken over the birth of Christ, it can turn into a time of extreme busyness and anxiety. We are urged to get the exact right gift for the one or ones we love, which causes stress. What if they don't like it? Or what if we can't afford it? I think I mentioned once before that Neiman Marcus every year has their fantasy gift. So I looked it up and they're still doing it. So this year, these are just 2 or 3 of the gifts. You can get a custom-made saddle $100. Or I'm still trying to figure out what this one is, a Crayola personalized pet masterpiece for $64,000. Or a 3-night stay in Paris with private tours for $185,000. Or you could spend 4 hours with the famed photographer Annie Leibovitz for only $500,000. It is kind of scary to think that somewhere somebody is saying, oh, that's the perfect gift. Charge it. Of course. With gifts like that, how does the person know if the receiver of the gift really cares about the giver or just the gift? But even us, not so well-to-do people who may have anxiety about incurring debt, especially in this economically chaotic time, we're encouraged right after Halloween to get everything ready, not for Christ, but for Christmas. And it can also be a time of experiencing extreme loneliness. Advent can become like that artificial speed our world traveler mentioned, and going too fast can lead us to not paying attention and to missing what is important. George MacLeod is a Scotsman who was the founder of the Iona community in Scotland. And he often shared this story about missing what is important. He wrote he was busy, he was writing letters, he was self-important. And his little daughter was going to school that morning for the first time. So she came into his room in her first school uniform, and he said, "Your tie's not straight." He said, then I looked at her eyes. She wasn't crying. She was utterly disappointed. She had not come in for tie inspection. She had come to show she was going to school for the first time, a terrific day, and I had let her down. I ran downstairs, I said all the right things, I crossed the road with her, I went to school with her, but I had missed the moment, missed the point. I will always see those eyes, sometimes when I'm very busy, sometimes when I'm writing a letter. I am forgiven, but I won't forget. Pay attention to who comes into the room, listening to what they are actually saying. Advent always marks the beginning of a new church year, and in this church new year, the days become shorter and very, very dark by late afternoon. We're surrounded by the density of the darkness, and it can be confusing, hard to find one's way, and a little scary, even when there's street lights around. At the same time, it's mysterious and has a sense of sacredness about it. Looking up at the sky and seeing all the stars and planets lighting the way for those who use them to navigate at night. One year I moved from Woodstock, New York down to St. Petersburg, Florida, and I decided I would take the Blue Ridge Parkway, driving by myself. And so I ended up on the parkway around 2 a.m. in the morning, and it was so much fog I could not see anything. And then I saw the taillights of a car, 2 red lights. I clung to that taillight of that car until we got to Charlotte. So light in the midst of confusion and darkness can be life-saving. Now, Advent is certainly not a one-dimensional time. It's filled with ironies, contradictions, and provides an opportunity to focus on our hopes and dreams. We hope that tomorrow will be different from yesterday because our future is based on the promises of God. The promises of what we might deem as impossibilities. The promise of shalom, peace, well-being, of goodwill among all people, of peace among all nations. At the same time, we need to look at the past. What have we learned? What was good? What was not so good? I don't know if y'all watched that series on PBS, The American Revolution. It was 2 hours every night for a week. I did get kind of confused after a while, but I was amazed at what I did not know. What I thought I knew about the American Revolution basically was July 4th, 1776, but that's anybody won that war, because in the showing they would say the British marched on such and such town and 1,000 Brits were killed. We won. 2 days later, and the Brits marched on such and such town, and the Continental Army, they lost 1,000 people. British won. And this went on back and forth for 5 years. So it always behooves us to look up something we do not know all the facts about, because it's probably something we either weren't told or we missed. The readings from Isaiah over this time will remind us that the ancient people were longing for those promises, longing for a better way. The idea of learning God's ways through walking in God's path and God's life suffuses this passage. What would it look like if people everywhere were drawn to God? All nations, cultures, races, with a shared desire for divine instruction. Do we not today long for that? What would that be like? We are told that people should put down their swords and turn them into plowshares, and we could use some of that thinking today for sure. We could lay down our weapons of sharp tongues, snide comments, false assumptions, and rumor spreading. We have learned in public and painful ways how weapons of this kind can wound, and sometimes mortally wound others. The Gospel of Matthew gives us a great image on which to reflect that of being awake and prepared for whatever comes our way. So it's all too easy to get stuck in living in or worrying about our current situation that we lose sight of the fact that God is still speaking to us. Amen. That every moment in time is filled with divine possibility. Sometimes I think we seem like we're sleepwalking through life, missing the most important incidents or people who are placed in our lives. I don't know if I told you this, but way back when my girls were like, must have been 3 and 6, I guess, and I was newly divorced. This friend of mine, her name was Gail, and Gail came to me and said she wanted to take the girls Christmas shopping so they would know what it was like to be able to shop for their mother, to get a present, because they were pretty sure the ex-person was not going to take them shopping. And I've never forgotten Gail's small action of kindness at that moment for the girls and for me. So this Advent, why not be intentional? Slow down, take the time possible to get engaged in each day, and even that can be tricky. Years ago, I think it was published in 1991, a book called Unplug the Christmas Machine, a complete guide to putting love and joy back into the season. And I was at the cathedral in Florida, and we decided to do a workshop on that. And so we're kind of going through, in the workshop, what it's advising us to do. And it says, every day you should write down a certain kindness that somebody did and who it was. And then at the end of the week, consolidate all that. So you have weeks and weeks of writing down what somebody has done for you all day long. And then we thought, well, wait a minute. That sounds like busy work. And then somebody else during the workshop said to people, instead of buying something, why don't you make something for somebody? Think how meaningful that would be to make something. We're like, wait a minute. That just adds more work. So Advent should not be a period of feeling that we are working to get the right present, make the right thing, bake the right thing. It should be a time when we can relax a bit intentionally and prepare ourselves for whoever might come into our lives or however God might be speaking to us. I've narrowed my suggestions down to one item. At some point in Advent, read the narratives of the announcement and coming of Christ into the world. They are found in the first chapters of Luke and Matthew. There are vague differences in both of those scriptures. It always helps to know the story, especially that the secular world spends a lot of money teaching children to accept the reality of a Santa Claus who loves people according to what is given body in us. The love of God is freely given with no restrictions. And according to the Unplugged Machine book, which I do agree with this, they think that there are 4 things that children, and probably adults, really want for Christmas. A relaxed and loving time with the family. Realistic expectation of gifts. Evenly paced holiday season and reliable family traditions. I always woke up to find the stocking at the foot of my bed. I think years later as an adult I realized that was my mother's way of keeping me in bed instead of waking them up. This is the message of Christ to the people around him. Be awake, be present, be aware, for God's divine inspiration may come at an unexpected time or from an unexpected source. Don't miss an opportunity to be present to another person or to be the presence of God to another person. You may be longing for the light of Christ and someone brings it to you. Be aware of what's happening. And you may be the light of Christ to another person who has been waiting and hoping for someone to listen, to understand, and to care. So this Advent, let us think of taking a pilgrimage together, walking into each new day by holding on and at the same time letting go. Taking our time as we travel on this journey in pursuit of an idea, of hearing the stories of our ancestors, ancient and modern, of how we fit into the story, always alert to the signs of the presence of Christ around us and even within us.